Okay, everyone. Hi, my name is Dr. Jennifer Gardella. I'm a social media and blogging consultant working out of the Doylestown and Central New Jersey area. I am honored to once again be talking to Misty Avallone of the Kingston Law Group. Hi, Misty.
Hi,
How are you
how
doing
are you?
today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Misty's juggling a lot in her life, which is very exciting, I think, to hear about. She really understands the world of divorce and family and is a divorce and family lawyer, among other things, in Central New Jersey in the Kingston area. I've asked her to come on with me today because, as many people know, I am a huge proponent of the idea of peaceful divorce. And since the coronavirus has hit our area very, very hard, it has become apparent that there are some people who may be living together, going through a divorce, realizing that they need to be getting a divorce, or their divorce is already filed and they're wondering what the heck is going on. So I thought I would talk to an expert in Misty. Misty, you want to explain your practice a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been working at Kingston Law Group now for 8 years. I cannot believe I've been licensed and practicing for 8 years. But it's a small town just north of Princeton. If you are on Route 1 or on 27 in Jersey, if you blink, you will miss it. But it's an awesome little town to practice in. And we've been serving the greater Princeton area for some time now. My partner Hannon's been practicing for 40 years. So, we're well trenched in that area.
Okay, and yesterday we did a lot of basics, right? You and I covered the topics of how do you get started, what documents do you need to get started, how can you be reasonable. Let's talk today a little bit about alimony. Again, what can people expect to pay in alimony, and what should they expect to receive?
So I would say, first of all, back to what we were talking about yesterday. When we get your income from from this year, from last year, regarding your tax returns and your pay stubs, we use all of that in a CIS so that we can discuss what your alimony may be, right? So we've got to look at your income. And when I say your, I mean our clients. And then we got to look at the spouse's income. And we have to look at what the marital lifestyle has been for the past 3, 5, 7 years or so. And look at what the incomes were and what the expenses were at the same time. Alimony is not a fast and hard rule or fast and hard calculation in New Jersey. You really do have to look at statutory factors and the incomes of the parties and the marital lifestyle. There was some talk when we had our new alimony law passed. People were trying to cut the marriage in half to determine what the alimony term was. So if you were married for 12 years, they were saying, okay, well, to settle this, let's do 6 years of alimony. But you could be doing your client, if they are the payee, you could be doing them a disservice, because if you look at the marital lifestyle and if you look at what sacrifices they made during the marriage or whatever the case may be, 6 years may not be enough to get them where they need to be. And it just might, it's not equitable. It's not reasonable in some circumstances. In other cases, that might be more than reasonable if they got more education or more training during the marriage and now they're earning well. You might not even have to look at it. People might say, they're both self-supporting. So you really have to look at the finances of both parties and the marital lifestyle to really determine what alimony will be in that instance.
I think there's a lot of misconceptions. I was divorced back in 2010, and at that time, there was such a thing as permanent alimony, and there was that whole grassroots campaign then that started with a professor at Rutgers University who lobbied and whatever he did to make it very clear that permanent alimony can be a problem for the payor, and led some receivers of alimony to do nothing because they had permanent alimony. So that's been a really big change in New Jersey divorce cases, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we call it open durational.
Oh.
And the theory is, like, if you're married 20 or more years, you're likely going to be subject to open durational alimony. But you could be married 16, 17 years, maybe 15, and you still might be subject to open durational alimony. You have to look at the factors of the case. And this is where we talk about the specifics of every single case. Your case is not going to be like your next door neighbors if they're getting divorced, right? Your kids might have health issues.
Sure.
They might have special needs. The wife may be disabled, even if it's, what we call an invisible disability. whatever the case may be, you really have to look at it. And that's why you have to go to an attorney who really knows family law. And if you're like you and you want to do a peaceful divorce, you want to go to a good mediator who will really talk to the parties and see, what's going to work for them and what they can agree to. And then they can go to their separate attorneys and see what their rights are and how those things are going to impact them. Because someone who really should have open durational alimony but only ends up with 6 or 8 or 10 years could be really hurt in the long run. So we don't want that happening.
Wow, that is a really good point. And there's a lot of us. I was a stay-at-home mom for 15 years and at the end I got my PhD. And my ex-husband, money was an issue, but he respected that at least. I wasn't going to be able to jump into the workforce making $200,000 a year.
Right.
You can do it, but more than likely. And also his job at that time, he was traveling a lot for work. So I couldn't actually go and get a huge job making huge money because I
Right.
was still in charge of all the snow days and sick days and school holidays for the kids. So
Exactly.
all of those things need to be, factored in if you have children, because again, I always say to people, you don't want the other parent struggling. You don't want the one paying alimony to be struggling, and you don't want the one receiving alimony to be struggling if they need more money, because that's going to affect your
Exactly.
kids.
Right. I always say this, the marital enterprise is a joint effort. And even though you're divorced, you're still a team.
And a
The
family.
team's expanding, you're still a team. And you still want, there to be strong links in that team. The weakest link will definitely pull it down. So
Yeah, that's a really good analogy to use. Now, what about child support? So child support, when I started my divorce, I was almost blown away by the case statements or whatever they are, the child support statement, that long document of the kid.
child support guidelines.
Yeah, that one. Go ahead and explain that to us. What happens there?
Okay, so that one's much more calculation driven. We plug in all the information. So we get both parties' incomes. And if there's any mandatory contributions that they have, those get pulled out of their income, but you insert them into the child support guidelines so that it can calculate it for you. Like if you have mandatory union dues, things like that. And then it calculates your share of the income. And then now alimony is not taxable.
Right.
So we now have to put that in the guidelines as, it's coming from the payor going to the payee, but it's no longer tax deductible and it's no longer taxable. So that goes into the guidelines. And then based on the amount of overnights and any other things that we put in there, like the cost of health insurance per week or per month or per quarter for the children, and maybe daycare, if we're not paying that separately per language that we have in the MSA, that stuff can go on the child support guidelines. And it calculates a weekly number for child support. So that one is very data driven, but it does calculations for you, whereas alimony is not a black and white rule or calculation. It's a little bit more statutorily driven and fact sensitive.
Now, what happens if, little Johnny is riding horses and it comes into the child support calculation as the family can't support this? Like, how does that work?
Great question. So, New Jersey statute also has language in there about child support and what are the needs of the children. And you have to go back to that CIS and look at what the marital lifestyle was and what the expenses were. If Johnny was doing horseback riding, or like a lot of kids are into fencing now, which is also very expensive. Yeah. If they were doing that, then the parents really have to take a hard look at it and say, one, what's in the best interest of our children? That's always the first and foremost question, right? And if that's a benefit to the child really enjoys it, but they can't afford it, they have to look at their entire economic picture and say, well, are there other sacrifices that we can make? Or is this something that he's not going to be able to do this year? Or maybe we'll make it work for next year or two, but then we're going to have to address it again. And so parties might have to look at, okay, well, do we stay in the house together longer? Do we maybe move into a house, each of us move into a house that's a little bit more modest, just so that our kids can have the things that we need. But you also have to sit down and have that conversation, especially if you're getting along, sit down and have the conversation together with that child and say, there's going to be some things that maybe we can't afford. Maybe parents just give up luxurious vacations or something along those lines
Okay.
if something works for the children. You just have to be able to address it. And if you can't afford it, you got to have that conversation.
Now, what
Now,
happened? Oh, go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say, a lot of things, major sports and things like that usually aren't covered with your regular child support. And the MSA, we say, I like to detail what's not included by child support. And we will say these things are not covered, and the parents will pay out of pocket per their income percentages from the child support guidelines.
Okay.
So maybe it will be 50-50 out of pocket, or maybe it's 70-30. It really depends on what that number is on the child support guidelines. And it's funny because the child support guidelines calculate certain things to be included, but sports shoes are not included in child support. That's like one of the many things that they excluded, and I always think that's funny. And clients always laugh about it. They're like, so the soccer fee might be included, but not the cleats. I'm like, yeah, unless we write it into the MSA that those things like work-related childcare and summer camps are going to be paid out of pocket outside of
Wow.
child. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'd never heard that. That's so fascinating. And what happens as kids, this just came up with a friend of mine, kid gets to high school, needs some help with the SATs, and mom wants to send child to private SAT tutor, or even the Kaplan schools are so, well, now not because everything's online, but in the pandemic year, we're doing everything online. But, that can range up to $5,000 for private tutors. If mom wants it and
Absolutely.
it's needed, what happens?
So, excellent question. If the parties are divorced and we did an MSA for them, we include a paragraph about that. It's in our college provision, and it says SATs, SAT prep, college applications, all of those things will be shared by the parties based on their income percentages from the child support guidelines. If the child actually has an aptitude, that's where they're going, that's what they're going to do. If your child is making D's and you want to send him to an Ivy League school and you're signing him up for all of these things, we've got to take a hard look at that.
Okay.
But if you know your child is doing well and they're driven and they're motivated and they know they want to study aerospace, physics or technology, whatever it is, and they want to be, or they want to go to MIT, or they just want to go, they say they want to go down the street, but they want to go to Rutgers. Rutgers is still not cheap. So we have to talk about all of those things and address it. A lot of people don't address it when their children are younger, but we still like to include something in there. And I even like to put in there that, they'll address it with the kids at a reasonable time, either when they're thinking about applying for college or maybe the year before, so everyone can be on the same page about, how many colleges are we applying to and what actually fits into this kid's realm of places that he could probably get into. And,
Wow.
does he have a reach school? And what's a safety? And can the parents afford it? And does he need a $5,000 SAT tutor? Or,
Right.
there's other changes. Maybe he applies for some sort of scholarship for one of those things. But the parents have to work together on these things.
Yeah. You
Now,
bring up so many interesting points because in Pennsylvania, the law is very different about college,
mhm.
or I guess I'm going to say the precedent is very different. A lot of parents don't write this into their divorce agreements. And then I actually have a friend who is a college counseling service, so she'll help your kid get into college. And about 70% of her entire business is working with kids of divorce. And she serves as the mediator at that point for the child to work between both parents.
Wow, that's very interesting. I know that PA, unlike New Jersey, PA does not require contribution from both parents for college,
Right.
whereas New Jersey does. So let's say, the parties are divorced and they never included something in their MSA. The party that's seeking contribution from the other parent, when they file an application, they should list all of the facts that supports that child needing to do the SAT tutoring and the reason why they're going to go to these colleges, their grades, their sports, their extracurricular activities, their other interests. Are they doing all the research themselves and they're very motivated and very ambitious? That's a great help. Like, you're likely to get a judge to say, yeah, sorry, pay where you're going to have to contribute to all of these expenses.
Right. Yeah. And I just want to state here that for those of you who are listening who know my divorce story, you know that I wrote my own divorce, and we did not include, or I don't even remember now, but anything about college. And that was because we were not working with an attorney. Like Misty here. And I will say that I know a lot of friends who don't have this written. And what happens is it becomes a nightmare for the children. And especially if the parents do not get along, the children and the parents sit in utter confusion at a time in their lives that should be nothing but exciting. It's stressful enough to try to get into college. So when
Yeah,
you work
exactly.
with a qualified attorney, again, Hannah and I talked yesterday about the nesting situation. I think you and I brought it up too. You know, you need to think long term, like an attorney, about how this can affect you. Because when you're getting
Absolutely.
divorced, oh, this will be great and we'll get along. Well, you haven't thought about 10 other things. So that's really
Right.
important. Before we go, because we're trying to keep these shorter because we could talk all day about this stuff. That's how
Yeah.
good Misty is at her job. I just want to ask you a couple questions for parents who have support obligations, either alimony or child support, and are right now losing their jobs because of COVID. Like, what's going to happen?
So that's an excellent question. Right now, courts are closed, but they are accepting applications via mail, and some of those we can file electronically.
Mhm.
And for alimony, you usually have to wait 90 days to file an application to modify. And with child support, whenever you, under either alimony or child support, when you suffer a substantial change, you can file for a modification. The question is, how soon is it going to be heard? And you really do need to keep trying to pay your obligation so you don't go into arrears. And if you do suffer a substantial change, you do need to file right away. You can obviously do the 90-day waiting period for alimony. For child support, when you file under either, you have your relief retroactive to the date that you filed.
Okay.
Now, the thing is, some people may be rehired in 3 or 4 months. So we're
Right.
talking about a short period of time. So if they fell behind, the arrears won't be that much. If they kept up, then they obviously just withdraw their application. But it's going to be a very interesting time, and a lot of obligations are probably going to be upheld without substantial proof that they're not going to be reemployed. And remember, if you did lose your employment, when you file for an application to modify or terminate, you still need to be filing job applications and submitting them and trying to interview. You can't just be like, well, COVID's here, no one's going to hire me. You do have to try to get reemployed.
Okay. And I think there's a call, first of all, if you're in a position where you are, your income has been affected in some way, and you are the receiver or the payer of alimony, child support, all of this, the first thing that you need to do is have a consult with an attorney to find out what your rights are. And at least then you have
Absolutely.
documentation and a plan in place that shows that you're trying to solve this problem. And I think everyone needs to
Absolutely.
remember also that there's a chain reaction to this. If one parent can't pay, and then the next parent can't pay their mortgage, and then, we do create this disaster that walks down. Now, in New Jersey, I have to say that the governor has put some protection in place for things like mortgage and rent, and as well as I just heard insurance as well, which is great. And there's all of this support out there for people to be reasonable and get through this time. You will be best served if you are showing along the way that you are seeking counsel and also attempting to get all this together. I think
Right.
that's really what the name of the game is. Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, Misty, thank you for your expertise. I always enjoy
Thank
talking to
you.
you. We seem to be doing it every day, which is great because there's so much to talk
Yeah.
about.
I was going to say, when things go back to normal, I'm going to miss our everyday chats.
Okay. Well, thanks. Have a
Okay.
great afternoon. Maybe I'll talk to you
You
tomorrow.
too. Yeah. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.